registered to vote absentee in the state of Michigan, I received an unpleasant surprise. As I had originally registered to vote by mail, I would be unable to receive my ballot until I presented my township clerk's office with a government-issued form of photo ID, such as a driver's license or a passport. Now, this presented a problem, as my township clerk's office is located in Heartland, Michigan, and I was in Nashville, Tennessee. Fortunately, I was already planning on going home once during the semester, and I was able to present my ID and pick up my ballot then. Now, if you are registered to vote in Michigan, or 10 other states, including Tennessee, you have to present a government-issued photo ID in order to vote. And while I'm assuming most of us in this room have such proper ID, these laws still affect us and are a growing problem in this country. While many details about these laws are not well known, the fact remains that they are blatant voter suppression, laws passed through fear and disguised as protection. And now those who benefit from these laws will argue against this, but their arguments are based in false truths and should be disregarded. Therefore, I propose that the Supreme Court of the United States should declare such laws unconstitutional. To fully understand why, it's important to first understand just how widespread two facets of the current system are. First, photo ID laws are increasingly common. 11 states currently require government-issued photo ID at the polls, and 6 more states have passed laws that are just currently not yet in effect. 12 states have passed these laws in the last 2 years, and legislation has been proposed in a total of 35 states. The second is that proper government photo IDs are not as common as you might think. The Brennan Center at the New York University School of Law did a study that found that 11% of Americans lack the proper photo ID, and therefore in current circumstances would be unable to vote if they lived in one of those states. But these laws are more than just unfair. In fact, they result in 3 major harms that affect far more than just those whose rights are infringed upon. First, there's the unnecessary economic cost. The Voting Rights Institute estimated that if all 35 states that legislation had been proposed in enacted these laws, it would cost between $300 and $800 million in the first 4 years alone, just to begin these laws. These costs result from training poll workers and buying ID machines, as well as the cost of providing free photo ID, which is currently required for such laws to be constitutional. Now, 31 of these 35 states already are projecting a budget shortfall for 2012. Passing these acts only incurs more needless expenses. We simply don't have the budget. We can't afford to pass these laws. The second harm is much more serious. Such laws suppress voting and drastically repress Americans' rights. Photo ID laws are analogous to a poll tax or a literacy test, measures designed specifically to prevent underprivileged Americans from voting. The United States was founded on the idea that each man, each male, white, landowning citizen, deserved the right to vote. Now, over time, this was generally found to be a bad idea, and the right to vote was gradually, occasionally begrudgingly, extended. But if the system still currently denies 11% of the population the right to vote, how much progress have we really made? And if we are content with repressing a section of society and denying people rights guaranteed by the Constitution, how can we call ourselves a democracy? The same study that found that 11% of Americans lacked the proper ID also found that this proportion was, shockingly, not distributed equally amongst the entire population. You may be surprised to learn that middle class and wealthy white Americans are unaffected by these laws. But however, the Brennan Center study also found that 25% of African American citizens over voting age lack the proper photo ID. Other groups affected by these laws include the elderly and the poor. 18% of citizens over 65 would be unable to vote in these laws. 15% of those earning under $35,000 a year. These laws are merely another way of suppressing the rights of weaker minority population groups. And if this repression is allowed to continue, how can we guarantee that it won't get worse? We are setting a dangerous precedent, and if we value our liberty, we cannot afford to turn a blind eye to these facts. Finally, on top of these harms, is one that affects all Americans, even those with the proper ID. Laws that prevent citizens from voting skew election results. We as a nation pride ourselves in our election process. We, the people, elect a president, and the will of the president represents the collective will of the American people, as he received the most support in the general election. Except when he didn't. Statistician Nate Silver did a study for the New York Times that found that such photo ID laws reduce voter turnout by about 2%. Now, this 2% is enough to narrow a gap or flip a swing state, potentially having a major effect on an election. To put this in perspective, Ohio and Florida are considered both major swing states that drastically impact the outcome of an election. In the recent election, both states voted for Barack Obama, but by less than a 2% margin. If those states required photo ID laws, a significant portion of the electorate, one that may have the power to change an election, would be unable to vote. To combat the serious problems presented by these laws, I propose that the Supreme Court rule that these laws are unconstitutional and in direct violation of the 26th Amendment. Without these laws, poor, elderly, and minority voters would all be more likely to vote. As mentioned before, the study suggests a 2% increase. A 2% change is enough to flip a swing state and change an election, which can make the president much more reflective of the actual will of the American people. Now, it's certain that those who benefit from this suppression will cry foul at my accusations. However, the two arguments they hide behind are patently false. First, they claim that these laws are necessary to prevent voter fraud or other abuses of the electoral system. However, these claims are completely unjustified. In 2002, the Department of Justice passed the Ballot Access and Voting Integrity Initiative, which was designed specifically to investigate and prosecute claims of voter fraud. Now, in the 10 years since that act was passed, the government has obtained less than 30 total convictions or guilty pleas for voter fraud. 30 convictions over 10 years? These numbers are so small as to be statistically insignificant. And scholars, including professors at Rutgers and the University of Kentucky, agree that voter fraud is extremely rare. The second argument is that photo ID laws don't prevent people from voting, as states are still required to provide free ID. And this is true. Currently, states are required to provide a free government photo ID if they enact these laws. However, these free IDs are still very difficult to obtain. First, you need another form of a government-issued identification, such as a birth certificate. And you need to wait in line in a crowded office during hours that are frequently not compatible with a job. The Wisconsin State Journal did a study and found that some people waited almost 2 hours in order to receive their ID. And mixed signals abound. The same report found that some people were told they were still needed to pay to receive their free ID. For example, Jenny Madison called ahead to her Secretary of State's office and was told she would need to pay $14 to get her ID. So she brought $14 to her Secretary of State's office, waited in line, and when she reached the front of the line, she was told she would need to pay $28. Frustrated, she left. As a country, we've come a long way in extending the right to vote. However, the current system allowing photo ID laws shows we still have a long way to go. Voter suppression is alive and well in this country, and we shouldn't turn a blind eye merely because we're not directly affected. The many harms of these laws greatly outweigh the benefits, which are themselves of questionable existence. We should heed the advice of the great Benjamin Franklin, who said that those who are willing to give up liberty in order to purchase safety deserve neither. Declare laws requiring photo IDs unconstitutional, and we take a stand against voter suppression and one for civil rights. Let us not sit idly by while rights are taken from those less fortunate than us, or we may open the door for our own rights to be attacked. Thank you.